Welcome to the third podcast in the Society Hub podcast series at the York Management School. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Abisola Barber, who is speaking today on executive positions, societal perspectives of young female Black executive role holders. Abisola Barber, welcome. It's really great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Not at all. It's our pleasure. It's really amazing to have you here, Abisola. So, Abisola, you have an extensive business career and significant leadership experience, which sets a formidable example to others interested in developing their career portfolio. And so I thought it would be helpful for listeners and viewers if I took some time at the outset to read through your biographical picture, given the topic of today's podcast. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely, although slightly intimidating to me.
Not at all. It really is fantastic. So Abisola Barber is a passionate and outgoing individual with a strong and dedicated work ethic and a versatile skills base. With close to a decade of experience and well-versed in financial services, in governance, business management, project management, divestment, risk and controls at the executive level, Abisola is a director for a global investment bank. Abisola additionally holds experience in and exposure to an array of industries and professions, including entertainment, public third sector, and commercial services. Her formative years were spent in government and politics as a strategic advisor and board member for several local government groups and national agencies, providing strategic guidance for content, execution and delivery of key children and young people services. Abisola sits on the advisory board for the University of York Management School, and her curiosity and challenge provides a fresh lens for decision making. Her professional work has seen her present on and write for national outlets, including BBC, television and radio, London Live and The Guardian. Abisola is a sought-after motivational speaker and coach and leads thought-provoking panel and seminar sessions on topics such as women leading the way, female leaders in finance, diversity, inclusion and belonging, and strategies for success. Through music, Abisola has sung in treasured music halls, including the Royal Albert Hall and Blenheim Palace. Through sports and fitness, Abisola's efforts have enabled her to partner with world-class brands such as Adidas, Nike, and Puma in designing and shifting the industry's response to support sporting apparel for the modern woman. She has modelled for H&M, Levi's, and Marks and Spencer's commercial output, and led the 2016 Nuffield Health Gym campaign. Abisola refines her on-screen presence through supporting artistry activity for several feature films and television programmes. A multi-award-winning young professional, Abisola has been recognised by the likes of the Financial Times, Yahoo Finance, the Global Thinkers Forum, the Telegraph, and Women in Banking and Finance. Her passion to make a positive contribution to society has led to her global recognition. Abisola graduated from the University College London in 2014 with an MSc in International Public Policy, and also graduated from the University of York in 2013 with a BA Honours in Philosophy, Politics and Economics. Abisola, with that snapshot of your career thus far, I know today's discussion will be invaluable to so many. So thank you again for being here.
No, thank you for having me, Sinead. Really appreciate it. Great to be able to join you.
Thank you. And so to start, our first question. Abisola, you have an amazing career history, as we've just heard, and extensive and formidable executive leadership experience across a range of business sectors. Also experience of performance and arts, as well as spearheading change for women in sport. What has been a key driver to your career success?
I think I've probably had three drivers, but they're all interlinked and they're all definitely connected. I must say, and I always caveat whenever people ask me about my career or the things that I've done, and I said at the start that it's somewhat intimidating. I sometimes think, how on earth have I done all of that in a short space of time?
Amazing, it's fantastic.
But it is linked to my drivers, absolutely. So growing up, always had hundreds of interests and hobbies, and I was always quite good at them, which was somewhat annoying to both myself and my mother and the rest of my siblings and everyone that I went to school with, because I was always that child that was good at the things that they did. Don't get me wrong, there are some things that I'm very bad at. I cannot draw, I cannot paint, I'm not particularly arts and crafts or creative minded in that sense. And I stay far, far away from all of that. But wherever I have found that I actually have a skill or an interest and wanted to pursue that, I've made sure that I've done that. So that's the first driver, having that actual interest and baseline hobby. And that's what keeps me engaged in the things that I do, because if I wasn't interested in them, I wouldn't dedicate the time and the energy that I do to them. I guess the second driver is more actually about regret, but regret in a positive light. And it's wanting to not sort of let an opportunity pass me.
Yes.
Or not wanting to say, oh, I wish I did this, or why didn't I do that? And looking back and reflecting on an opportunity that would have presented itself and not having taken it, not having done it. And so even to this day, where I find that, I may be pressed for time, or I may be very tired, or I may have competing interests, I still have to remind myself, if I look back in a month's time, a year's time, 10 years time, will I regret not doing this right now? Or, is this an opportunity or an experience that I'd absolutely love to do? And so it's also being fueled by that, wanting to essentially grab life and really make the most of it. Knowing that we all have a finite time on the planet, be that through climate change, through health, whatever it is, and essentially wanting to make the most of it. So I'd say that's driver number 2. And then driver number 3 very much links to driver number 2. But particularly in the workplace, wherever you find that there are big organizational changes or seismic shifts and leadership movements, businesses that are closing down, starting up, wanting to actually just jump right into the middle of that. And very challenging thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do. No one is ever really comfortable with change. Change, you'll have people that work in change management, project management, all sorts, and they'll say, oh, I absolutely love change. No one loves change. Change is always uncomfortable. We're human, and that's normal and natural. But it's getting to grips with being uncomfortable with that change, being comfortable rather with that discomfort, and accepting it, and also appreciating that in those periods of change, there are those opportunities, and they aren't often. Sometimes they are literally once in a lifetime. And it's having to be bold enough and brave enough to jump right in and to take it and grab the bull by the horns, as it were, so to speak. And so I found that throughout my career, particularly on the professional side within financial services, trying to spot and identify, and sometimes they are sort of changes that are widely publicized and everyone knows about, and you can very easily get involved. Sometimes they're changes that through your network you find out. And so for me, it's always been a case of trying to keep, my ears to the ground, nose to the ground, and sense where there isn't a chance to essentially exploit that opportunity and that change.
Great, fantastic. And I really like what you said, Abisola, about regret, wanting to make the most of the opportunities that present themselves. I think that's very inspiring. And also what you said about change management, because often here I say to students that it's not every source around change management that talks about the negative side of change, the difficulty and the challenge. So I think that's really, really helpful in terms of just the reality, as you say.
Exactly. Exactly. We are human. We do like consistency. We do like stability. We do like to spice things up every now and again, but that's not to say that we don't like, at least having some form of an anticipation of what's to come. Being thrown wildly out of your comfort zone, whilst that will help you grow, it does scare everyone, and it's okay, to admit that, to accept that.
Absolutely. Thank you. So the next question, you've kindly agreed to speak today on the perspectives of others in society toward leading young Black female executives. Given your career trajectory to date, can you provide an overview of the range of perspectives you have experienced from people around you in society as your career has expanded?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's actually interesting, as we were initially talking about this topic and as I was thinking about these questions, it didn't necessarily shock me, but it did strike me that the perspectives are very different depending on the industry. You know, as you mentioned, I started off in politics. I was very young when I started off in politics. I was 11, which
Wow,
is
amazing.
exceedingly young. And naturally, obviously, my perspectives and my understanding of other people's perspectives will have been influenced by my age, by my stage in life, by, you know, all of those other exogenous factors. And so I appreciate that also, that as my situation, my financial position, my leadership position, my you know, location of living, my age, all of those different factors, they will change how I reflect on how I was you know, taken in or responded to. But one thing that does stand is that there are very much different perspectives depending on the industry. So in politics, for example, you know, even what I see today and my experiences when I was very much in the political sphere was the expectation of me to be, you know, loud but not too loud, you know, vocal and championing and really pushing for, you know, whatever campaign or item was on either my manifesto or that we were really trying to get entrenched or sort of ratified. You know, there was the idea in the sense, and I really actually appreciated this at the time, that I was very much on at the decision-making table. I was invited to the decision-making table. Often I didn't have a voice at the table, but at the time, I at least could appreciate that I was invited. Very much being the minority in the room from a racial perspective, a gender perspective, an age perspective. You know, there were often meetings where I was probably, you know, one of the 20 people in the room, there were probably maybe 2 or 3 women, of which I was one of. I was definitely the only person that was under the age of 30, maybe 40 at the time. Definitely the only Black person. And, you know, even being accepted into that room was a huge thing in the early and mid 2000s, because the conversations on diversity and inclusion and equity hadn't really gotten to where, I mean, even still today, we're not where we need to be, but they weren't even entertained. And so, you know, even still being there and feeling accepted, yes, I wasn't necessarily always heard, my voice wasn't always welcomed, but at least being there made a difference. And I could sense that they still wanted to include me in that way. So there was very much that perspective in the political sphere. You know, in sports and fitness, I found that very interesting. Depending on, you know, the brand, the fitness studio, the elements, so whether it's sort of the design and the creation side of things, whether it's the actual performance and sort of community building and fitness instructor side, depending on how you are presenting yourself to the audience, depends on how they want to take you. And I say that specifically because often I found that, particularly on the presenting side, they would want to cherry pick elements of your Blackness or of your femininity or of whatever diverse trait you had to promote. And often that meant, you know, not really then being your true authentic self, or having to lean in far too much on one side that you're neglecting others. I definitely felt that on the creative side, there was a lot more acceptance. And I think the broader sort of fitness wear and sportswear world is, you know, genuinely actually embracing and seeking the opportunities to build in that diversity in all different realms, whether it's from, you know, the modeling side and the campaigning, which I've been very much involved in, to the actual design of the clothing, which is something that I spent quite a lot of time with one of the global brands on, to make sure that actually they have that inclusive range. And it's not just inclusive in terms of, you know, what are the bodies that you see on the mannequins, what are the bodies that you see in the adverts, but actually who are the minds that are around the table, how are their perspectives, you know, being included to help evolve and shape the design. So I spent quite a lot of time with one brand actually particularly designing their fitness leggings. And we'd formed a sort of consultation group, maybe about 50 of us globally, all involved in different sort of types of fitness activities and sports, and to appreciate the diversity of thought, of perspective, of industry. You know, we had power lifters and weightlifters, we had, you know, yoga and Pilates instructors, spinners, you know,
Fantastic.
runners, the full range. So even from my perspective, aside from, you know, the typical, shall we say, diversity traits that we look at, you know, whether it be race, gender, faith, sexuality, aside from all of that, having that richness of true diversity, I thought was just fantastic. So sports and fitness, it does actually really depend. And then financial services, I'll just touch upon that. You know, it's been interesting watching my career and the career of those that I started out with, be it, you know, through internships or graduate schemes, or people that I've interacted with through, you know, like mentoring programs that I'm involved in, or workplace diversity efforts. And you know, I very much am the person that, because I do a lot of work in diversity inclusion sort of side of desk, I'm very aware of my own privileges, and I have to check that at the door, you know, when I walk in. I know that I may not necessarily be where I am today if I, you know, didn't have the educational background that I have, if I didn't necessarily do the subjects that I studied both at universities and for my A levels and GCSEs. You know, the fact that I look like me, sound like me, can conversate with a lot of people that are in senior management on, you know, to a similar degree that they can. I know that, and I appreciate that. And it may and probably will have been very, very different if all of those factors were different for me. And so I can't categorically say that, well, you know, all industries or all banks or all, you know, financial services institutions are fully accepting of every Black person, every Black female when you join the intersect. Number one, because I don't have that experience to categorically make such a sweeping statement. But also, two, I've realized that my position and perspective is very different to someone else.
Yes.
Who isn't necessarily similar. We may be similar in the sense that we're both Black or both female, but we'll have very different outlooks and outtakes of life. And so I know and I recognize that I've been very, very fortunate because of those qualities that I have. But with that in mind, I must admit, actually, for an industry that people think is, you know, not inclusive, is full of that, you know, typical sort of pale male and stale rhetoric, they are genuinely trying, and there is a lot of genuine effort that is going in to make sure that there is diversity in all shades, not just, you know, do you have Black women, do you have Black men, do you have you know, bisexual, transgender, any different type of sexuality represented? Do you have someone that, you know, loves to dye their hair pink or is covered in tattoos? You know, all of these different traits that we would have thought, oh no, you can't accept that, or that's not what you would expect to see in financial services. You know, what we are seeing, you know, this sort of step back and realization that, you know, does having pink or blue or rainbow colored hair impact the way that you think and therefore perform? No. Does being a Black woman change the fact that you can deliver excellent quality output? No. You know, you can still be a fantastic worker, and you are a fantastic worker, regardless of whatever diverse trait you have. So why are we, you know, sticking to this is the perfect candidate, and if you don't look like that, then we're not accepting you? So I've definitely found that there's a lot more welcoming within financial services for that diversity. There is a long way to go, as I've said, particularly from, even if I just split my main intersections or my main diverse traits being Black and being female, there are still, you know, a lot. The lack of female leadership representation and leadership is reducing. A lot of banks are getting there to at least hit the sort of typical 25 to 30% target, but there's still ways to go. Black representation is nowhere near where it should be in terms of reflecting society, reflecting the client and the consumer basis of all industries. And there is a long way to go. And you join then those two together, and I find myself in almost in a field of acres of no one around me that then looks like me, in just that Black female intersect. There are more that are coming. There's a lot of work that's being done through, sponsored initiatives, active engagement with different diversity networks, external, professional coaches and career services that can help offer all of those solutions, particularly because, that's not where the expertise of financial services or any other industry is. So that is starting to increase. I think also the interconnectivity that we are seeing globally is really, really beneficial. So the more that we see the promotion of Black females in America, it's not so much in Asia. And I think that's something that we really need to actually try and think about, what actually is the diversity issue in Asia? I won't say crisis, but issue in Asia, because it's not the same as the Western world. That's a different topic, which we can wax lyrical on at another point, but seeing, the visible promotion and essentially display of the growth and development in leaders and their leadership traits, and actually what they look like and what they do, and not just putting those Black female, Black male, Asian female leaders in what I tend to call soft positions. So the non sort of P&L, sort of profit and loss owning or revenue owning positions, but actually putting them in there and seeing that growth is really, really encouraging to the change that's coming. But yeah, it's definitely a long way off from where it was when I joined 10 years ago. But the growth that is to come is only going to be fueled even more so, and especially by this next generation of workers that's coming in. The change and the request and the demand and what they do and don't accept, it blows my mind sometimes, because I'm just thinking, wow, working life is really going to change going forward.
Which is amazing. And what's really powerful about what you said, there's a number of themes there, Abisola. And you said when you started out originally about being invited, being at the table, but often not having a voice. And while powerful, it's, I'm sure for listeners and viewers, still very shocking as well. While there's much positives as well that you've talked about, this is still contemporary society as we like to think, and yet still a long way to go. And as you said, there are really interesting piece around what is diversity and Asia and the long journey. But what's really encouraging is the strength of what you're seeing coming through in terms of the caliber of leadership, and that's really reassuring in terms of how things are going to change, which must be really exciting as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. What have you found, what have been the most challenging societal perspectives you have been faced with in your career?
That's a great question. I think the main one has really been what people assume of me, and who they think that I am, and who they think I sort of should be in that sense. So, I can't really sort of say why people necessarily have those perspectives. I mean, we all have our own biases of who we think people are. You'll look at a photograph of someone and you'll automatically think that they're either kind or potentially horrible or stern, or any particular quality that you may want to pick out. And so I understand that our natural biases sort of sway in those ways. But I think for me, it's often what people assume. And actually, I'll take the music industry, sort of the musical sphere of my engagement there as one of those. So I'm actually a trained classical singer, and I sing in a number of different sort of venues, choirs, different occasions. And often whenever I'm speaking with people and I say, oh, and so I also sing and I'm involved in music quite a lot, and the automatic assumption is that I'm a gospel singer. And I've had many arguments about this, because it's actually one that very much riles me. And that's the assumption that because I am Black, I therefore must only sing gospel. I do sing gospel, but that's not what I'm trained in. That's not what I do. Yeah. Exactly. And so it is that baseline assumption that because I am Black or because I am a female, it's kind of their version of if then. And they have a very closed-minded, it's a very exclusive if then. It's not a if then open sort of and having to help people on that journey is often very tiring, actually. To sort of showcase that no, I'm not just this sort of narrow definition or expectation or assumption that you have of me. It's actually far broader. And when I then say, well, actually, no, I'm a trained classical singer and I sing, you know, choral type pieces, and they're very shocked because they don't think that that's possible. They don't, you know, they've never necessarily seen it or haven't heard of it. And so it's often difficult having to always challenge those perspectives and to almost prove to other people that you are more than what they have already naturally reduced you to. And sometimes it's really fun actually to go on a journey with people as they grow and as they learn and as they you know, expand their own knowledge and understanding. And some people are very, very welcome to it. Others are very much resistant to it and still don't then see where the fault lines are by having those assumptions or having those perspectives rather. And so that I'd say is the most difficult, having to always challenge people's assumptions of who I am or what I am or what I'm capable of.
Thank you, Abisola. What is really interesting there, what you said about how tiring that can be, along with it being enjoyable and fun at times as well. And so what comes across is that not only are you engaged in formidable change in your career, but then in your parallel aspects of your life, it's an ongoing conversation that's being had. And that's very striking as well. So thank you for sharing that with us. What strategies do you adopt to rise above such societal perspectives, please, Abisola?
Wow. It's very difficult. And I think having and building a network of support, and it doesn't necessarily have to look like you, but I've definitely found, as you know, a Black woman particularly in financial services, the need to also surround myself with other Black professionals and understand their perspectives and what they're going through and be able to support one another has been very, very important. And so having that sort of foundational basis and almost like the sort of morale that you'd get from a sports team or from a partnership, having them champion you being able to champion them, having someone that you can call on who will understand what you're going through has been really, really important. You know, there've been some really trying times in my career where I've felt, what's going on? What am I doing? How do I navigate this? You know, I'm feeling this. Am I just feeling it because I think it, or is this genuinely something that's actually happening? Because sometimes actually also, particularly from a race perspective, there are a lot of microaggressions that are so under the radar, shall we say, that sometimes you question yourself, well, did they really mean to be spiteful? Did they really mean to say this in that manner? And as I said, it is quite tiring also just having to do that sort of mental gymnastics. And reading the room constantly and knowing, you know, this is the situation you're walking in, or this is what's happening. And so having that support network is so key. You know, be it through the people that I've met through work, my family is super important from that perspective as well. You know, people that I've grown up with as well who've also seen my journey and know of the different things that I'm involved with, and it can also give me a heavy dose of reality and say, Abby, you're being very silly, you know, come back down to earth, stop thinking about it in that way, or try it from this perspective. So it really has been about keeping and maintaining those relationships. That I think is very key, but also keeping your eye on the end goal. And it's funny actually that I say that, because I technically don't have an end goal, and it's something that I've always been mindful of. But for me, my end goal is making sure that I'm better than where I was. And so always constantly improving. So it doesn't matter where I end up, whatever industry or, you know, whatever position, as long as I know that I've grown and I've, you know, expanded in understanding of whatever it is I then choose to be. And so keeping that in mind to really encourage me to get through whatever, you know, trying or difficult time or difficult situation I find myself in, and knowing that that's not the end. You know, it's a very cliche saying that if it's not okay, it's not the end, sort of thing. But I do firmly believe that if it's not okay, you know, it's not the end, and things will work themselves out. But you've also got to put the effort into making sure they work themselves out.
Excellent. And what's really refreshing there, Abisola, is when you talked about the importance of mentoring, which so many listeners and viewers, I'm sure, will have heard a lot about, and hearing you speak about how relevant and important that is. But also refreshing as well, where you say you don't have a specific end goal. It's always about improvement and developing. And I think that's really refreshing at a time when often people are told, particularly school leavers as well, oh, you must know what you want at the end. So I think that's really refreshing. And the way in which you've expressed it leaves so much other possibilities open when you're striving to constantly improve as well.
Absolutely. And that's also, I guess, why I've maintained so many of my hobbies and interests, because I was also, quietly concerned when I was younger that I didn't want to let go of any of them, because actually I could have had a career in them. And it's funny because I mean, I will definitely credit my my history of financial services to my mother, because she knew that I was good at maths and I was sort of smart in that lane, and she always really pushed me to keep going. I mean, now I'm definitely not the best mathematician, and actually, funnily enough, I didn't think I was good enough to join financial services because I didn't study pure maths or pure economics at university. And so for me, I wanted to still do things that I was interested in, because they kept me going, and because I was good at them, I could try and at least see where I could get to. And the way that society is moving now, we don't have the traditional careers that our parents or our grandparents had, where you necessarily stay in, the same industry for the same job, even for 20,
Indeed.
30, 40 years. The growth of, the kind of creator sphere, influence and marketing, online and social media type career avenues and channels means that actually people are thinking about, what does a job really mean, and what can I therefore do? And the growth in both intra and entrepreneurship, the growth in development and venture capital and startups of a whole different array, mean that actually you can get involved and do almost anything. And so that for me is also a huge comfort, because the day that I do decide to sort of call it quits on financial services as my main profession, I know that I still have an absolute plethora of other interests that I've maintained, so I can still dive into and keep developing those skill sets.
Excellent. And so have you found perspectives to be more negative or challenging in some sectors of society as compared to others?
I'd say broadly no. I'd say broadly no. I mean, I touched upon sort of the fitness side, where often they want to draw out specific elements of your diversity for, whether it's for their own gain or just that's how they want to sort of present you. Would I say that's necessarily negative? It is. The undertones are negative. I won't sort of shy away from that. But I think because also having a business mindset and knowing that it's fundamentally a business, that is their business tactic. Whether I agree with that or not is a different story. I don't, but I can at least understand it, and it's not necessarily spiteful. I would say on the whole, from my experience perspectives, or at least the different range in industries and their perspectives on me being whether it's being young or being a Black female, they have broadly been the same. And I think that's consistent because of my personality. I'm not a different person when I'm on a photo shoot than I am when I'm in a board meeting, or any of those different diverging realms. And so because I have that consistency, I receive that consistency back. I think it'd be very different if I behaved in a completely different manner in one aspect and then the complete opposite somewhere else. And so I would naturally get a different response back. But I must admit, broadly speaking, I'm positively received on the whole. I don't necessarily have too many allergic reactions to people, and vice versa to myself. I think one thing that and I also give myself a talking to on this, is that bias that we have towards or against people. And so just also being aware that we have these natural biases. Some are very much conscious, and people display them and exact them in a very obvious way that it's negative. Both positive and negative bias can be positive and negative, but a lot of the time they are unconscious. And so just realizing and understanding and thinking about that as I reflect on people's perspectives of me. Is that because of a bias that they may have? Is there something I can do to help them
Yes.
in that respect? But also being respectful of the fact that they may not want to receive that
Mm.
help, and you can't actually help everyone. And so, and that's a constant learning experience. You'll never get the perfect formula. But at least being aware and being mindful of that when you think about how people receive you. But yes, I would say my consistency, at least in who I am, has meant that I've had a pretty similar treatment in all of those areas.
Excellent, thank you. And what perspectives, if any, have you experienced that give you comfort that there is some evidence of positive change emerging in how society treats leading young Black female executives?
Well, there's definitely an increase in appetite, right, for diversity. We see that through, so many different programs, calling for Black interns, Black senior leaders, development pipelines. There's a real push, obviously, mainly in the US, because racial diversity is a main significant driver there, as well as gender. The UK isn't there yet. Europe isn't there yet. They're starting to, and particularly where it's a multinational corporation or company that has that global presence, they are tending to align their diversity metrics or aims or goals so that they are globally consistent. But you do see, and it is a tangible increase in appetite, and so that does naturally lead to express commitments and statements for wanting, whether it's a quota, a target, whatever numerical label you want to place on it. But you do see that increased desire to have that range in representation. And so I am seeing that, there are more efforts to at least actually search for diverse candidates,
Yes.
interview and consider diverse candidates, open the slates up, target universities and schools and colleges that are more likely to have a diverse population, but also not just targeting universities and schools and colleges, reaching out to school leavers, thinking about apprenticeship programs,
Yes.
looking at sort of horizontal experienced hire programs where people are coming from different industries. There is a lot of work going on in a range of different companies that are looking for that, particularly in financial services. Obviously, that's where I can speak from, but that is very much happening. So there's that gives me comfort that I know that it's not going to sort of die out with me in my generation. It will only increase, and it'll only get further entrenched. A lot of people are wary of the idea of a sort of diversity inclusion team or officer, or what real change can they bring. But also seeing the passion that's coming from not only those offices and areas of companies, but the change that is being driven by the younger generation and their sort of, I guess, lack of acceptance for wanting to maintain the status quo. They are fiercely adamant that things cannot stay the same. And so, I know that it will only change and have an entrenched change, and things won't just revert back to how they were. So definitely, I'm getting a lot of confidence from that. I've got a few people that I work with, or work for me rather, that are in that kind of Gen Z and coming population, and some of the conversations, even for me, and I'm not particularly old or that much older than them, I'm still a millennial in that sense, but there are things that they talk about and think, and their approach, that I'm just thinking, wow, you're really going to be a driver for change in the future, and they have that innate spirit within them. And so I'm definitely comforted by the fact that is coming.
And so inspiring.
And they inspire me. They really, really do inspire me. And I've always been sort of one of my main sort of mantra, I guess, or reason that I've been involved in so many things, is wanting to make sure I make a difference and leaving things better than they are and then I found them. I found that I'm quite a resilient person, and I can handle and take a lot of slack and a lot of the pressures. And there are a lot of people that can't. And so I'd rather take it for the people that can't and make sure that they don't have to do that. but more so the next generation are just saying, we're just not taking it. Absolutely not. So it's just so refreshing to see that. And I think more broadly across business and society, we are seeing that businesses are actually trying now to really tap into the Black consumer market as well. And so even just those kind of snippets of hope there, that there is, whether it's a selfish perspective from business growth or change or development in that sense, but also inclusion and making sure that the full consumer base is included. There's a Black and Afro sort of hair care company called Treasure Tress, which is run by a lady that I know, Jamelia Donaldson, and they wrote a report towards the end of last year looking at what space within the hair care market, what are the untapped sort of areas for growth, and the Black consumers, which have so much buying power, and how they're being excluded from decision making, from presence in being able to shop and explore and really utilize. And so therefore, how can you encourage businesses to go into those untapped venues and areas? So you see that coming through more and more. And so it's really exciting just to see where the broader range of business and society is going, in terms of really embracing and encouraging diversity.
And so much positivity potential coming through in the next generation.
Oh, absolutely.
As well, Abisola, which is fantastic to hear. And you also mentioned the United States of America and how they are much more advanced in this area, but UK and Europe still a number of steps and a long way to go as yet to get to that level. So to achieve a society where leading female executives of every ethnic, societal and diverse age range are the norm and not the exception, what do you consider needs to happen?
So I think firstly, just to not necessarily caveat, but just to explain. So I wouldn't say it's that the US are advanced. I would say they are more and taking advance from a broader concept, because racial dynamics and racial tension is a huge issue in the US, and not to dilute that or not consider that, but from a corporation perspective, more broadly, their diversity agenda is more advanced than the UK and then Europe. So just to clarify on that.
Thank you for that. Apologies.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. And it's worth stating, because actually often I have a lot of conversations with people where they say, oh, but things are fine in the US, so why do we need to consider that? Well, things aren't fine. Things are very far from fine. We constantly see and hear, and actually more often than not don't see and don't hear of racial tensions that are going on in the US because it's hidden. But that's a separate conversation. What do I think needs to happen to really actually achieve that diversity in society? For me, everything starts at a young age. And so actually we need to think really, really from the school settings, from the early career early learning settings. What are we doing to actually teach about and expose diversity? Because actually you think about it, and you always see those heartwarming videos on the internet of two children, one Black, one white, embracing one another, and not seeing color, I say in inverted commas. And actually it's true, because we don't have those preconceived notions at that young age of, you look different to me, therefore I treat you different, or you're not equal to me. Everyone is equal. A toddler is a toddler is a toddler. And actually we don't start seeing or building in a lot of these kind of misconceptions or hierarchical thoughts until we start to mature and go through school ages. A lot of it is also nurtured too, naturally, what environment, what home environment and sort of exposure to materials that young people go through. But how do we actually encourage that diversity from a young age? So I think a lot of it starts from the schooling and the educational side. From a business perspective, naturally the main aim of a profit-making business is that to make profit. It's somewhat separate if it's not for profit or if it's a charity. And so it's almost, I'd probably, from my perspective, would say it's easier for not-for-profits and for charities to do more in terms of reflecting society. In many instances, actually, they have done more and actually are reflective of society a lot of the time. But often we neglect and forget that, particularly for industries that may not pay as well or have some form of an elitist background to it, or are very different to financial services. You take the art industry, you take a lot of charity work, you take a lot of fashion work, and actually a lot of these industries offer unpaid internships or do not provide the financial support, or have very strict requirements to get in, and so you're naturally already excluding that diverse
Yes.
lens and slate that otherwise would have wanted to have been involved and included, because they either can't financially support themselves to engage in that internship opportunity, or they don't or may not have those sort of educational qualifications that you specifically are asking for. And so it's the kind of that narrow-minded expectation that you must be X, Y, and Z on this list, otherwise we're not considering you. And so the more that businesses and companies can expand their mindset and expand their thought of, well, what is a great candidate? Do they have to have all of these qualities? Do they have to have, gone to a Russell Group university and gotten these grades? Do they have to have gone to these set of schools? The more we can broaden our sort of requirements list and actually reduce the list of expectations, the better quality I think we'll actually get, because we're considering from a far greater talent pool, and we're not excluding as many people. And that's something that I've been trying to do through a lot of my sort of extracurricular, shall we say, activities. How do we encourage young people that, don't necessarily go to Russell Group universities or don't consider themselves as I guess eligible in whatever way you want to interpret that for financial services, encouraging them that actually you can find a career in financial services or in any industry. You don't have to have studied computer science or economics or applied mathematics. You don't have to have the mindset and perception that I had, where I thought I'll never be accepted because I didn't study economics. Well, actually, no, I have been accepted and I am great and I've done great. So that's not to say that you can't too. So how do we open people's mindsets? How do we encourage that broader range of thought, that broader range of experience? And until we start sort of getting on board with that and really practicing that, we'll continue to see what's going on. But there are, as I said, there are definitely positive changes that I've seen being enacted now, and that are coming and being developed even far greater than I can sort of cobble together, to really ensure that that broader range of people and diversity of thought, perspective, personality, race, age, gender, faith, all of it will be included and will be sat around the table.
I think what's equally powerful, I'm speaking with the HR research hat on, and an area that is also of interest to me is really challenging, just because things have been done one way in the past, and really challenging sort of the foundations and historical foundations as well of how we've done things, which is really powerful. And I love your perspective on that as well, Abisola. The last question, unfortunately, Abisola, we could go on for much longer. Every podcast concludes with a discussion of the free resource that speakers are sharing with our listeners and viewers. What resource have you chosen to share today, and why, please?
So I have chosen to share the Harvard Business Review as sort of a conclusion to my talk. So I'm wanting to share that because there are a number of fantastic articles of interest that, really, really hone in on different leadership qualities and characteristics, the changing perspective of executive management and what that means today. Some thought pieces on what does diversity in the workplace look like? Are we just paying lip service to certain elements? Yes. Perspectives from a range of different authors and writers that come from different backgrounds. You have Black female authors, you have Asian authors that have really actually understood and studied their craft, and so there's something for everyone definitely there. So we'll definitely encourage people to have a look. You can subscribe to it. This is not a paid promotion from me or anything, but I really enjoy a lot of the articles that I read on there, and I always find something that I just stop and I think, wow, okay, that's actually a different perspective that I didn't consider. So do check that out. And then if anyone
Excellent.
wants to hear anything further from me, or understand some of the things that I'm involved in, I will also share my website link so people can find out more or get in touch.
Great. Thank you so much, Abisola. And listeners and viewers can pick those resources up at the bottom in the descriptor of the video as well. So, Abisola, our time is sadly up. Thank you so much again for being with us. It has been amazing. You've been so generous with your guidance, advice. I could have listened to you for much longer. So you might consider coming back again to chat with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Sinead. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you so very much. Bye for now.
Cheers. Bye-bye.